So I'm very glad that you could join us, and we appreciate you being here tonight. So for those of you that have signed on to this session, who just got on here, this is our Aspen Dental Ask Me Anything with Molly Lang, and we're here tonight with Dr. Renee Prochaska. I'm saying that right? Prochaska?
Prochaska.
What? Say it again.
Prochaska.
Prochaska. Dr. Prochaska, this is a really unique opportunity because you have 1 hour to ask Dr. Prochaska any of your questions. And you can do this anonymously. So you can submit your questions if you use that box at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions to her. And we will answer them as best we can. So before we get started, for those of you that have joined that don't know too much about Aspen, I do want to just cover all of our bases. Aspen is a dental support organization. So we provide management services to our partners. So all of those Aspen Dental branded practices that you may have seen, we are the ones providing the non-clinical support to those dental practices, which ends up being about over 800 branded practices across the nation. And hopefully by the end of this hour, you'll have a better understanding for what that looks like and what exactly we are providing. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dr. Prochaska. And Dr. Prochaska, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and say hi to the group.
Hey guys, I probably know most of y'all, but I can't see you, so I don't know who's actually here. But I graduated from UAB's dental school in 2019, so just over a year ago. Before that, I went to Auburn for my undergrad, graduated there in 2015. I started working at Aspen right when I finished school, so July of last year. So it's been just over a year with Aspen. And I go by Dr. P for my patients.
Do they have a hard time saying your name?
They don't even try. Half the time I'm Dr. Pete, or they make something else up and I'm just like, yeah, sure, that's cool.
So you've been with Aspen Dental since you graduated in 2019. And like everybody else on who's participating tonight, you know, you had a lot of different options in front of you. What was it that made you choose Aspen?
So for some reason, Aspen just always felt right for me. They started recruiting pretty early on, and I just got to know some of the people involved with it. And I liked the idea of working, first of all, not doing a residency. I was done with school, but I knew I wasn't ready to be out on my own yet. And definitely not clinically where I should have been if I needed to be like trying to fend for myself, make my own money, everything like that. And I knew Aspen had a really good mentorship. So that's really what drew me to Aspen. The other thing is I don't know the business side of anything and I don't have to at Aspen. And that's really helpful for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know. And you mentioned that, you know, you weren't really ready to, or you weren't thinking about going into a GPR. Did you feel like, I mean, looking back now, would you have done it any differently? Or did you feel like you got that mentorship that you needed?
I absolutely would not go to a GPR, and that's personal for me. I learned so much through the doctors I've worked with at Aspen, and I've gotten so much opportunity and experience. I've like thinking back to where I was last year, it's crazy how far I've come in a year. And I got to make money all last year, whereas I had friends in GPRs who weren't making money, and now due to circumstances they're having more trouble finding jobs. And I don't know, I think I did it the right way, but it is definitely different for different people. I learned better getting thrown into things. So
Sure. Yeah, I know some students do feel more comfortable going directly into a residency, and it just kind of depends on the person. But For you, it sounds like things have worked out. So can you walk us through a little bit I think for a lot of these guys, that mentorship is the big piece right out of dental school. Can you walk us through just from the very beginning to even today, what that mentorship looked like for you directly out of dental school?
So mine was kind of different than most people's with Aspen probably is. I started right out of school at a POP, meaning a dentist owned the practice I'm working for. And she was training me. She trained me for 4 weeks there. It literally started with the first week shadowing, learning the computer system, kind of going over things with her, assisting her, just getting my feet wet with dentistry again. I didn't start working until like July 15th, I think was my first day. And then slowly she'd put me in to do like a filling or a crown prep refinement or something just small, some treatment plans that we would go over before. And it was the weirdest thing ever, just going in, drilling out the decay, and then filling the tooth without anyone checking it. But we made it. And so then just slowly over time, she worked with me on that. And then she was hiring another dentist, Jacoby People. Some of y'all may know him. He graduated in 2018 to lead the office in Gardendale where I was working. And so she was training him for a little while. I went to Bessemer and worked with Dr. Yang, and he was kind of my mentor there for a while longer. It was just having someone to run by and say, hey, what do I do? Come help me pull this root tip out. I don't know what I'm doing. The patient's giving me trouble. I can't get them numb. Just issues that you would have as a new dentist. And at school, you always had faculty for. I always had another dentist there with me for. And then once I finished the additional training in Bessemer, I went back to Gardendale and worked with Dr. Peoples. And I mean, he helped me pull teeth till the day he was leaving to go to his residency for oral surgery. So I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from Dr. Yang. Of course, I've learned a lot from Dr. Haight. She's the owner of my practice, and I talk to her almost every day. There's still days now that I'm alone. I'll send her an x-ray and be like, what's the best way to pull this tooth? And she's just always there to help me.
Now, you mentioned a few different people here. So you have Dr. Haight, who is the practice owner.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Dr. Peoples, who was the lead dentist in the practice while you were an associate.
Yes, he was the lead dentist while I was an associate in Gardendale. And then he actually left to go do a residency. He wants to be an oral surgeon. So bless him for that. Lots more years for him. But
so were all of these people sort of acting as mentors for you or working with you in different ways throughout your first year?
yes, they definitely all were. Dr. Peoples a little less so than Dr. Yang and Dr. Haight, just because he could relate to me more on I was you last year level, but it was even promising for me seeing how far he'd come, and I learned so much from him. Really, they were just all mentors.
Now, did you get to spend any time do you have endodontists and oral surgeons in your practices?
We do. We have an endodontist who comes once a month or twice a month sometimes, and she will do root canals. I've actually done 0 root canals since I've graduated. It's completely up to you what you want to do, but I didn't want to touch those, so I do refer all those to her. And then we also have an oral surgeon who comes to our practice once or twice a month, depending on the month. And he does the tougher extractions. He can do sedation. In some Aspen offices, we as the general doctors don't use nitrous, so he will do nitrous on the patients who need nitrous. And I mean, gosh, I should have that guy on speed dial. Anytime I have like an issue with an extraction, a question about like some strange lesion, he does implants and we talk about implants, and he responds so fast. I don't know how he's actually working because he's like getting back to me on things.
Wow, that's nice. That's good to have. right on hand as you're doing something and you kind of need some assistance. So that's great. I do have a question here. Someone wants to know, do you have clinical autonomy over what you can do?
Absolutely. I do my own treatment plans. If someone else happened to do the treatment plan and I see the work and I don't think they need the filling, or if I don't think I can do whatever it is, like some crazy extraction, I have the ability to just say either like, hey, I don't see a cavity here. I'm not sure what the other doctor was seeing, but I don't think you need to do this. Um, it's just, I do all of my own treatment plans. It's really not looked at by anyone else except for when I first started. My mentors, which were all doctors, would kind of walk me through things, but I've never been told to do anything I don't want to do.
That's great. How many patients are you seeing on, well, let's pose this question this way. I think this might be more helpful. How many patients were you seeing when you first started with Aspen, and how many patients do you see on average, would you say?
Gosh, I probably saw like 2 or 3 in the morning or 2 or 3 in the afternoon when I first started. Now it depends on the day. There are days where I see like 30 people in a day, but that's not necessarily me really working on them. It's denture steps, new patient exams, things that I just like pop in. I'm not there for very long and pop out. Dentistry in the real world is so much different than dental school. You don't have to wait around to get someone to start you off. You don't have to set anything up. You don't have to clean anything afterwards. For dentures, most of the steps, especially in Alabama, can be done by an assistant. So you just kind of go check them along the way. And I have not made a temporary since I've graduated. So all of those things really do help speed you along and you can do more. But it's definitely a lot of patience. You get a lot of experience, which some people like and some people don't like. It really depends on what you're looking for.
How did you go? So if you were seeing 2 or 3 patients a day, how did you go from that to seeing almost 30? Obviously, it sounds like you have help, but you had to have some sort of time management skills built in there along the way.
A lot of it was just kind of, I got slowly eased into things. When I first started, if I was on a production, I was on the production and never had to step out of the production because my mentor would be all over the place at once. And as I got more comfortable with maybe leaving during it, I could do more. And it's something I kind of pushed upon myself to be able to do. And then just over time, like, I don't even know really when it happened, but suddenly, like, I realized like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing so many people at once, and things that used to take so much longer weren't taking as much time. Just the more you do it, the quicker you get. And we do control our own schedules. So I basically, when I first started, told my office manager like, hey, I need 2 hours to do 2 fillings. And then I realized with someone suctioning for you, it actually takes like 10 minutes to do a filling. So we could change the times around to fit my schedule. And as I shortened appointments and started adding more people at once, I could see more people.
Someone had a question about the hours that you're working. So what are your hours right now?
Currently, they are 7:30 to 5. I have worked all sorts of hours. Some offices with 2 doctors full time will be open from 7 to 7. One doctor will work 7 to 4. The other one will work 10 to 7. I was working, gosh, you can really almost, it's up to your MCD, so the main dentist or the practice owner, to pick the hours, but they'll work with you on it. But as long as you're working a certain amount, you're usually good, and you can kind of pick times throughout. So I've worked all sorts of different hours in different offices, and then Fridays we do work. I think the office I'm in now is 7:30 to 12. I've done 8 to 12. I've done 8 to 1. I've done 9 to 1. It really just depends on the office and what's going on.
We have another great question. Someone very friendly is asking how many chairs are in the practice that you're working in, and how many other dentists are you practicing with?
So in every office, there are 7 operatories. One of those is hygiene. Usually 2 are overflow, and by overflow I mean just denture steps. Some are in new patients, and then about 2 in production, depending on the office. I've never worked with more than 1 other doctor, but basically until I said like, hey, I'm good, I'm comfortable, I was with another doctor. Right now, literally starting yesterday, was my first time really being completely alone in a practice, other than when COVID was happening and everything was weird and different. I was actually in Gadsden for the past few months, and I was working with a doctor who came 3 days a week, so I was alone 2 of the 5 days I work. And that doctor actually teaches at the Foundry, so he was really awesome to work with. I mean, that guy places implants, he does endo, he does it all, so he was really good to be around. And I still, even though I was technically the lead dentist in that office, he was a mentor to me because he'd been doing it for so much longer.
Now, you've mentioned doing some moving around. Is that related to COVID?
So, yes to COVID mostly. In the beginning, it was just since Dr. Haight hired 2 doctors at basically the same time, she couldn't train us both at once. So I was in Bessemer while the other doctor was training with her. And then sometimes if like a doctor needs to go out, they will ask you if you are willing to go cover that office. I usually was, just because it's kind of fun seeing other offices, seeing how things are run. So Gardendale was the practice I signed with. I worked in Bessemer for probably about a month. I've been in Trustful for 4 days total. I worked in Coleman because of COVID and Gadsden because of COVID, and those were longer drives. And there was one day I went to Montgomery and I worked like 9 to 3. It was great hours. They paid me to drive, which they pay you to drive long distances anyway. And they paid me way more than they usually pay me to go to Montgomery. I still don't think I'd do it again because the anxiety I got from driving all the way there. But there's definitely opportunities to go to other offices. That being said, there didn't be like, hey, you have to go here, you're fired. It was like more, my owner just called and she's like, hey, do you mind helping? And I don't say no to things usually. So I was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of the docs that I've spoken to during, coronavirus, not many of them have done much traveling outside of their practices, but it kind of depends on your relationship with your practice owner and what that looks like. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Aspen Dental is that the practices are owned by a dentist. So can you talk a little bit about that relationship with your practice owner and what that looks like?
So my practice owner owns just my practice in my case, but she's currently looking to buy other practices, which is why I've kind of been going to other ones as well with her. But I mean, I talk to her almost every day. Her office is basically her baby. She's very aware of what's going on with it and always willing to help. She helps me through cases with patients, issues with not necessarily staffing, but because that's like the office manager's job. But if I had any issues with any of the people, I would go to her about it. She's the one who pays me. So if I wanted a raise, I would talk to her about that. It's basically like just having a boss anywhere.
Is she the one that interviewed you when you initially
So
applied for the?
I didn't know it was an interview. I was talking to Robert, who was the Aspen recruiter at the time, and he's like, hey, go to Gardendale and check out this office and see if you like Aspen. And I was like, okay. And I went like right after school. I looked exactly how I look right now, maybe even worse because it was in school. Kind of walked around the office. She asked me some questions. I just answered them completely honestly because I had no clue that it was an interview. And then afterwards, he's like, she liked you. And I was like, oh, cool, okay. And then he's like, yeah, do you want a job? And I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. So I didn't know it was an interview, but she was the one who interviewed me. She was the one who hired me. And she's definitely taken really good care of me ever since. I know that like I mean, my gosh, she's driving to Gadsden right now so I can work in her Gardendale office, and she lives in Birmingham. So, and I mean, I'll text her at 9 o'clock at night thinking like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this, and she'll respond. So she's
So you
great.
guys have a pretty good relationship.
We have a very good relationship. She's really into being like, not like best friends outside of work, but we've gotten dinner before with our husbands. Like, she just likes us to know each other on a more personal level too and get along.
And how's that like in the office too? I mean, you've been through a couple of different offices. What's that environment like with the other people that work in the practice?
It's great. Different offices are all kind of different, but in their own way. And it's basically like every office is its own little family. And it's like you just know everyone so well. And even like being in one office to another office, you leave and you're like sad to leave because you're going to miss these people. But for me, it's like I was excited to go back to Gardendale. Like I like all my assistants. I like my hygienist. She's great. And it's just fun to be in an environment where like, yeah, some days work sucks. That's just how life is. But like they're all in it with you. And it's just like nice to have that, like, oh gosh, blah, blah, blah's here again, and be a little upset about it and then go treat them, get it done with, and move on.
Yeah, yeah. I'm getting a few questions about your patients. So let's chat about patients for a minute here. What types of cases are you doing? Like, what are the procedures that you're doing? What have you gotten experience in?
So our patients are probably very similar to who you see at the dental school. A lot of everything. We do a lot of dentures, but dentures at Aspen are nothing like dentures at school. You have a lab tech who sets all your teeth, who makes your wax rims, who does any movements, and then they're there so I can be like, I don't know what to do with this denture. It looks weird. I can go get my lab tech. They'll come out. They'll look at it. They know what they're doing. They fix it. I always hated lab work, and it's great because I don't have to do it anymore. At some offices in private practice or other companies, they don't have a lab tech, and there's some things that you sometimes have to do yourself. I have friends who've told stories, and some of them are good at it, but I'm not. So lots of dentures, and then crowns, fillings. We do. Our oral surgeon right now places implants. We're going through courses right now to learn how to place them. We got cone beams. We'll do hands-on learning. They're right now actually thinking about using the foundry, but that's still getting worked on, so we're not sure on that yet. But eventually that's definitely an option. It's not something that I'd be forced into doing, but with all the software and stuff and the support from the oral surgeon and people who've been doing it longer, I think I'd be comfortable with trying it. But that's, I mean, the sky's the limit on options. We have payment plans. Some people accept really expensive treatment plans. Some people have no money. It's just, like I said, it's very similar to who you'd see at the dental school.
And right off the bat, were you given the opportunity to take certain CE courses or kind of expand on your knowledge? So Invisalign or implants or any of that?
Yeah, so Invisalign, I started in July, and in September, I went to Chicago for 3 days with one of my assistants and learned how to do Invisalign. And so those CE courses were there. There's an onboarding class for new doctors that you take about 5-6 months into starting, and they once again send you to Chicago, and they'll do like a basically crash course on like what's going right in your practice, what's going wrong, here's ways to troubleshoot these things. We had like a crown and bridge talk, a denture talk, how to talk to patients, treatment planning, patient flow. And so not only are you getting all of these CE courses for free, they are paying you your daily salary to be in Chicago, where they feed you and take you out for drinks. And it's like you stay in a nice hotel, and it's a really fun time. I was actually talking to my assistant about it the other day, and we're like, we just want to go back. Like,
Yeah, this is all pre-COVID, right?
Yeah,
Like this
that's
when
true.
you could do all these fun things,
That
and
is true. But I have,
eventually things will go back to normal.
yes, but I do have way more hours of CE than I could ever need just because it's handed to me on a silver platter with drinks. It's nice.
Now, what about your patients? What's the age range that you're seeing for them?
So I don't see children. That's a personal decision. You can see whatever you would like to see. Usually for me, it's like 18 to 80 something probably. The majority of the patients tend to be probably like 40s, 50s, 60s, and then up just depending on what they need. But it's really a pretty good mix and it kind of differs between offices. I
Yeah,
will say most of them are more low income than what you'd see at like a ritzy private practice.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it always does depend on, I guess, where you're located, but typically that's what our patient base looks like, exactly as described. And are most of your patients that you're seeing, are they coming back for their treatment plans? And
Surprisingly, yes. I mean, basically the way you think about it for a new patient is you have 10 new patients on the schedule, 5 of them will show up, and 2 of them will accept treatment. But once they do accept the treatment, that means they can afford it or they got approved for financing for it. They actually follow through with it. And once again, out of dental school, if your crown prep doesn't show up, your crown prep doesn't show up, and life goes on. It's not like you're losing any grades or requirements or anything like that. And there's also plenty more to do, so it's not a big deal.
yeah, I mean, with 20 to 30 patients a day, you're definitely staying busy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I am getting a lot of questions about salary. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned getting paid during some of your training. What did that initial contract they mentioned? Did you have a contract when you started with Aspen?
I did. It was like a 3-page written in English. Like everyone at Aspen probably gets a doctor wise contract. And I had a guaranteed daily salary. As an associate, there's the possibility of getting 8 to 10% of the total office production once you take out everyone's salary and all of that. Dr. Haight, my boss, basically told me when I signed in, don't expect a bonus as an associate. And she told me the truth. I never made a bonus as an associate. That being said, it's a pretty good competitive rate. And I don't know, I was very happy with it. And then since I've now moved up to the lead dentist in the practice, I'm making more money because there's a different salary for that lead. And then I also get a higher bonus percentage. It's 18 to 20 or 16 to 20 or something. I honestly don't even know. But it somehow number wise works that you get paid a pretty good amount on the months that your office does well. And most offices with Aspen are pretty productive.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that. Um, and you mentioned earlier your contract. So are you held to something with that? Are you required to stay for a year or 2 years, or are you kind of free to go if it doesn't work out?
So it's a 30-day, I think, notice. If you signed in, let's say, October right now, and we're graduating in June, and you found another job between then, it's really easy to get out of. I did have some friends in dental school who did that. I've also worked with doctors who've decided they weren't happy with their location or this wasn't right for them. They turned in a notice and then were offered the opportunity by one of the regional managers to say, like, hey, if you're not happy here, like, it's okay if tomorrow's your last day. So you're not tied into anything really. obviously go by whatever your contract says, and it's like a month or 2 months or something, but I've never even seen them hold you to that.
Yeah, we typically like to say, that they would like to have some notice before you leave, but it's not always required that you have to do it the 30 days. Every contract does look a little different. And of course, every practice owner is going to have different things that they'd like, but we typically call that an offer letter and not a contract, because we're not technically holding you in place. But that's how that essentially looks with new associates. And any other questions that you guys have on the daily rate or the commission pay, please ask them. We're happy to answer any more questions on that. I wanted to ask a little bit about how many, I wanted to ask a little bit about how many patients. You mentioned earlier that you were seeing, 3 or 4 patients a day. In dental school, how was that transition from seeing, a few patients and not having anyone there to support you through it to kind of getting out and seeing more? What was that like?
It was actually much easier than I expected it to be. Like I said, without having someone check you through every single step and having to wait in line and get up and go to supply or wherever, and like, oh shoot, I forgot to ask this question. Like, that's not an issue anymore. You have your dental assistants who literally set everything up for you. If you need something, half the time you just look at them and they know what you want and they go get it. You don't have to clean up after patients. You don't have to make temporaries and do so many things that it just makes the time fly by. Also, having someone suction for you and blow air on your mirror, like, it all saves so much time. So it's a pretty easy transition. And like I said, they like eased me into it so slowly because I asked to be. I was like, I'm not ready for this. And they're like, okay, let's do it this way. And it was just like, I mean, before I knew it, I was suddenly actually working quicker. And it was like the time when I started in Gardendale and then I did my month in Bessemer and came back to Gardendale. One of my assistants was like, wow, you really sped up a lot. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I've been doing it now. So it's definitely, I mean, it's a big change. And the first time you're in there, basically kind of alone, it's a little intimidating, but then you're really not alone because you have someone there with you. The very first crown prep, I'm going to call it, I was supposed to do was just removing an old crown on number 8 and then refining it and taking the impression. And that crown was bonded on there so hard that I had to literally drill the entire thing off. And I got halfway through it and was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Or mouth's been open for too long. And went and got my boss, my practice owner. And I was like, Dr. A, help. And she kind of laughed at me, went in there, took it off. And she's like, you're welcome. And that was it. So you got a lot of support, even though you are alone.
Did you feel that support as an associate as well? So did you feel like coming into Aspen, you had that support kind of right off the bat?
Oh, absolutely. It was, I mean, as soon as, because I was an associate at her office. And so I was just never alone. And even if I had a question about something more on like the Aspen side of things, I had a regional manager and a district manager and an office manager and all these people who are just there to support you on the non-clinical side of things too. So you're really just, life's good, life's easy.
Now, you have a director and a regional manager, which you've mentioned. What types of things are they helping you with?
So it's more the regional manager, the directors above them, and I have a good regional manager, so they don't need to step in too much. But they'll help with things like staffing concerns if people aren't showing up on time, scheduling, figuring out how to maybe add more new patients to the schedule, help think through ways to schedule smarter instead of doing like back-to-back fillings and wanting to kill yourself after some time. they'll kind of look at it and be like, hey, it could be better to do it this way. And they're not telling you this is how you have to do it, but it's more just suggestions to help along the way. And they really are there almost more to support the other office staff, just to keep the office running. But they're also, I mean, if you have to talk about pay or really anything, they're just.
Can you talk a little bit about the other staff that are in the office?
Yeah, so we have an office manager who basically runs the office. They'll do, am I still on this?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. It kicked your face off for some reason.
Can you see me now?
Now I can. So the office manager's there. They basically like run everything. They're the ones who tell the dental assistants when to be there, kind of just call patients, etc. Then we have a front office staff. A PSR is basically the person who works at the front desk. They check people in. Right now they do the COVID screenings. They call patients to remind them of their appointments. They'll do any scheduling, run insurance through, enter some information in. And then there's an assistant office manager, and they just help the office manager. What they also do is when we finish treatment plans or anything that involves money, they go to them. So you don't have to deal with that at all when someone's like, how much is this going to cost me? How am I going to pay for it? Oh, my office manager will help you with that later. So you're like completely free. It's great. They just do all of the other stuff. And then in the back, we've got a lab tech who does dentures and partials, everything removable. We do send crown and bridge stuff to an outside lab. And it is Aspen Labs that we use, but they actually have really good stuff coming back. I'm happy with the lab I'm using. And then we've got dental assistants. I have 4 of them, but it really differs between offices and how many doctors are there. And then we have 1 hygienist. Offices have 1 to 2 hygienists. My hygienist is just amazing and can do everything, so we don't need another one.
How many chairs do you guys have in your practice?
There's 7 operatories. 1 of them's hygiene.
Okay. So there's a lot. That's a lot of movement for one office. Is it a typical size of a practice that you've seen? I know you've seen a couple of different ones.
Every single office, I think, has 7 operatories.
7 operatories.
And most offices honestly look the same. So it's like I left Colton, went to Gadsden, and if I didn't look outside, I was in the exact same office, which is kind of comforting when you move around. It makes it easy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it sounds like you kind of like to do a little bit of that too. I did have a few other questions going back to salary. Someone wants to know, did your salary help you to pay back your student loans?
Oh yeah, when you, like it's crazy how much money you're suddenly making, like going from nothing and feeling really poor to like having money in your bank account is awesome. I mean, we bought a house, so.
I am getting a few questions about just approximately the daily guaranteed rate. So typically, depending on where you're looking to go, it can be about $600 daily guaranteed rate. And again, that kind of depends. Sometimes it can be more than that. Sometimes it can be less than that. The practice owner ultimately decides on that. And then that 8 to 10% that she had mentioned previously is pretty typical for an associate, what they're going to be getting. Before coronavirus, we did tend to do sign-on bonuses or cover relocation fees, especially if you're going to an area that's, really in need of a dentist. So that should kind of help with some of these questions about salary and income. I'm sure you have friends that went into private practice and went in other avenues. Would you say that you ended up pretty relative to what they ended up in terms of making a solid enough income to survive off of and pay your loans back?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, I mean, not higher than everyone, but higher than most people. And then I never had that built-in stress of like, there's no patients here today, or my root canal fell off. And lots of those people started doing those bigger procedures right out of school because they were making 30% or whatever of what they brought into the office alone. And so they had that added stress of needing to have patients and see the patients and treat these patients. Whereas I mean, I don't think they'd keep me there very long, but theoretically I could just sit in a corner all day and make a salary. So it was comforting having that, and it definitely was plenty to get by on.
Do you feel like you have that opportunity just to kind of hang up your coat at the end of the day and you don't have to think about what's happening back home at the office or ordering supplies or getting your patients through the door the next day? Does it feel like you can come in, do your work, and go home and not have to take it home with you?
I go home every night. I've never ordered a supply. I don't know. I know who orders them, but I don't even really know what they're ordering. If I need something, it's there. Um, it's, gosh, I could not look at my schedule for tomorrow, walk in the door and be fine. Most of the time I come home and I'm done. The only times that I'm not is if maybe I'm asking my boss a question or something. But yeah, I leave work at work, and that's a wonderful feeling.
That is always a good feeling. I think it's something, especially as a new dentist, you want to be able to have that kind of work-life balance and not feel like you're thrown in and you have to do all these other things that you didn't learn in dental school, like how to manage a dental practice or how to order supplies or work with insurance companies or any of those things. I'm getting quite a few questions regarding, next steps. Like, what should people do here if they are interested in Aspen and this sounds like a great opportunity for them? Would you have any suggestions on what next steps they can take?
So let me know, and I will refer you because I think we get a referral bonus for that one.
That's
But
right.
I can definitely hook you up with people. Molly can hook you up with herself, really, because she, I think, is the recruiter for Alabama now.
That's right.
And she can get you matched up. And if you want to move to North Carolina, she probably knows someone or knows someone who knows someone to get you in contact with to get you set up there. It's a pretty simple process.
Are you involved in helping with, so if your practice owner is interviewing a new doc who's going to be in your practice, or even just a new staff member, have you been involved at all with that process?
Yes. She actually had me interview everyone that we were interviewing as my future associate because I'd be the one working with them. Same with dental assistants, front office staff. It's not something that you have to do, but she was like, hey, are you interested in meeting this person? Of course, I have to spend all day with them. Like, yes, I want to meet them and make sure I like them before. So, yes, I was involved. She even checked with me, like their salary, stuff like that. We talked through all of that together as a team, even though ultimately, as the owner of the practice, she would make that decision.
Someone asked, how would they react if you needed to take maternity leave?
I don't think it'd be a big deal. I mean, we have staff members taking maternity leave all the time. I got married, went on a honeymoon. I took Friday before the wedding off. I took the whole week after the wedding off. I was leaving early some days before. And then COVID happened, so I took a lot of time off. But yeah, it's like you basically tell them, give them enough advance, especially as an associate. You're not the only one in that office. So it's really not a big deal. And there's so many dentists within the Aspen network that they can always pull someone like what I used to do to travel to your office to cover for you while you're gone.
I was going to say, you mentioned that you did that on a few different occasions, and I have spoken to some docs who, have done that. You have this community, so like you're in dental school, and you have all these people that you're in dental school with, and then you graduate, and I think that's kind of nice that when you come on with an organization then you have sort of this community of other people that you can kind of coexist with and interact with. And if you need to take a week off, they can help you out and vice versa. So it sounds like there is some of that that goes on within the practices in
And
Alabama.
it's even like not within your own practice, but like the owner of the Trustful practice, Dr. Hershowitz, he happened to live in the same apartment complex as me, like 2 doors down, and we met at an Aspen event. I covered for his office sometimes. I actually helped him find someone to hire for his new office in Tuscaloosa. And it's like, I know he does some things differently than my owner. My owner graduated from UAB, so sometimes I'll hit him up with a question. It's really a good community of people because we're all working for the same company. And Alabama, pre-COVID, did like doctor things where we'd all get together on like a Friday and go to Top Golf or something. So we got to know each other. UAB recruiting events, we'd get to meet each other. And then also all those trips to Chicago, you get to meet dentists from all over, and that's really fun too.
Fingers crossed we'll be able to do another Top Golf event before 2020 begins and ends. But do you have any advice for these guys as they're thinking about their interviews and they're thinking about kind of weighing their options? Any advice that you would give them in their final year of dental school?
So as far as for like interviews and stuff, just like be yourself and do what feels right for you. I wouldn't necessarily chase the money as a dentist. You're going to make money. You're going to be fine. If you think a residency is what's right for you, obviously if you want to specialize, do it. But even like a GPR, if you're more comfortable with something like that, I wouldn't tell you not to do it. It just wasn't right for me. But I just really think if you have the right feeling when you're somewhere, you probably have that feeling for a reason, so stick to it. As far as the rest of dental school goes, good luck. I know COVID's probably making it even worse than it was before, but there is a light at the end of that very long, dark tunnel. There were plenty of times when I was in dental school that I really regretted being there, but it's definitely worth it at the end of the day. You just gotta make it there. So keep pushing. You'll get a job soon and you'll have people helping you, and life will be so much better than it is right now. The world will not be against you when you graduate.
And you mentioned that I think your interview was actually a shadow day. So you started by shadowing an office. Is that something you would recommend to these guys?
Absolutely. When you start, I don't know if UAB still does this, but my freshman year in our ethics class, like the very first day we were there, we watched some video like Aspen's the devil, they're going to make you do all these things and it's horrible. And that kind of stuff, even I can tell you every day that it's not like that, but you need to see that for yourself. You need to see the way the office runs for yourself, and that's with Aspen or any other practice. Kind of see how the staff gets along, see like, is this a place I fit in, or is this totally not for me? Because it's definitely not for everyone, and there's nothing wrong with that, but no one can tell you what's right for you. You've got to figure it out yourself. So shadowing, and even shadowing a bunch of different places and just see what feels right for you.
That's typically what I recommend to dental students. Don't just shadow at an Aspen practice, shadow with another DSO, a private practice, shadow in a few different places so that you can kind of get a feel for what you want, what you don't want, what you like, what you don't like, things like that. It's going to help to see a few different things. And I'm sure, have you had people come and shadow in any of the practices that you're in?
I have, and most of them actually are like we've even had people like UAB undergrad students who want to become dentists who show up like, hey, can we shadow you? And we're like, yeah, sure, come in. And it's a little different now with COVID. We're not really supposed to have other people in the operatories. But if any of y'all are interested, you're welcome to come see what we do every day, because it's kind of normal to have someone in and out. We have lots of people shadowing us, and then we even have people training in like dental assisting programs who come and get some hands-on experience. So We like people.
Before we sign off for the night, I do want to cover a little bit regarding COVID and the impact that it's had. So obviously it did impact you in that you were traveling to a few different offices. Were there any other changes that happened? Were you doing teledentistry? Were any of your offices closed permanent or completely during the time? What did that look like?
So we, like, when COVID kind of started to hit, we closed down. We like started limiting our hours some, and then it did end up being something where the offices, most offices closed. I'm not sure if some maybe stayed open for emergencies at
I
first.
think very few, but we did have some that stayed open during
Okay.
rough
I know, like,
April, May.
I think I was furloughed, meaning I wasn't getting paid, but I was still getting benefits like insurance for 2 weeks, maybe. It wasn't as long as it felt like looking back at it, because I never actually missed a paycheck. So I got paid every 2 weeks. Some were smaller than others, but I did make a paycheck every time. And then what Aspen started doing was they opened some offices for emergency care, and then they got into teledentistry. So I started doing teledentistry for probably about a month, where they shipped me a laptop and I talked to patients like basically how I'm talking to y'all, but I could see them. Those were definitely interesting, but it was really nice. It was like working from home. I'd get a text message from one of the people, like an office manager who was setting the call up. They'd be like, hey, you've got a patient. I'd go turn on the computer. I'd talk to him for 5 minutes and I'd be done. So we did that. And then we slowly started opening the practices, first with reduced staffing and reduced hours. And then it just kind of eased back up into normal as all those restrictions let up. I will say working for a large company was definitely beneficial during that time. Not that it'll hopefully happen again, but I was able to do teledentistry, and get paid pretty well for it, which you couldn't really do at a private practice when that owner is struggling just to pay their own bills. We had masks sent to us, we had gloves sent to us, like corporate people dealt with all of that, and it just wasn't ever a stressor for me, which was nice.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know. And I guess that gives you a little bit of experience too, to do the teledentistry and see that side of things, which I'm sure a lot of people did have to do. That I know of, we didn't have any practices that closed permanently. And I think every single practice is back up and running again. Are you seeing the same number of patients, or how has that flow kind of looked since coronavirus?
Now it's about the same. It did take a while to get back up to that. For a while, like, the lobbies were closed, and we're still doing screenings. We're still cleaning between patients. My office does have separate rooms for every patient, so we're not really worried about air cross contamination because they're alone in a room. But it was definitely slow going at first, and then I think right when things really opened up again, it was really, really busy. And now that school's starting back and everything is extra weird for all the parents, our patients are slowing down. But it's a cycle. They'll pick back up at some point.
I'm sure you always have some months that are busier than others too, and things like that. Well, great. Thank you for answering all of our questions. I think this was very helpful for these guys to hear about what your day-to-day is like, and maybe some of the reasons why you chose to work with Aspen. Hopefully we were able to answer all of your questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure that Doc wouldn't mind if I reached out with some questions that you guys had, or those of you who are maybe interested in shadowing once we are back and running with that. But thank you, Dr. Prochaska, for coming tonight, for talking with us, for answering all of our questions, and for letting us sort of pick your brain, so to speak.
Yeah, no problem. And if y'all have any questions, you probably know how to contact me. I've got Facebook, so you can reach out to me directly. If you have my phone number, that's cool. And I'd be happy to talk with you.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, that will conclude our Ask Me Anything session for tonight. I hope everybody has a great evening, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.